to your right.
It's beautiful.
I love willow trees. Oh, and those willow trees. Yeah. All of them.
So where is Edith?
Next to Paul.
Like the right or the left?
I think to his right.
Death has taken Paul Scher. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there is lamentation. In their tears there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Paul's love, for his mind, for his laughter that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for his companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and are now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. In the time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us the ever-new message of God's nearness. It tells us of our kinship with the Creator in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. Psalm 23. Adonai ro'i v'lo echsar. Binotesha yarbitseni almei menuchot yenachaleni. We'll read together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. From Ecclesiastes. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. I'd like to invite Noel to come forward and offer a few words.
I met Paul on Mother's Day in 2003 at Laura's house. I had only just recently met Susie, and since my mother was in California, I invited myself to meet Susie's family on that particular Sunday. Paul and Ann had just returned from Cuba. They had Cuban cigars. It was love at first sight. I had a wonderful relationship with my own father, but he died in 1993. Paul easily filled the void, and I called him Dad when Susie and I tied the knot in 2005. Susie and I have a dear friend who's a Catholic priest in Cleveland, Father Tom. When I spoke with Tom after Dad passed so peacefully in his own home, surrounded by his family, Tom said that Paul was a great man. As I thought about it, I realized that the phrase, a great man, is thrown around a lot. But with Dad, the phrase is a simple truth. Indeed, he was a great man. I want to stop here and take a minute to apologize before I start in earnest. In truth, I may not be the best person to eulogize Dad because, frankly, I'm awed by him and his accomplishments. Not only by his philosophy of life, but how he lived it and how he affected all around him. We're here during the COVID-19 pandemic, unable to host a proper funeral for Dad, which would have been a crowded affair. And had we been in that setting, I would want to confirm for everyone in attendance not only what they already know, that he was a man of great humility and grace with a quirky sense of humor, a sweet, loving man, a caring father, husband, grandfather, uncle, friend, mentor, but I would also want them to learn about the reach of his accomplished life. So I apologize because this eulogy will talk to those few family members who are here at this gravesite who have heard it all before. But it will also speak to those not able to attend, to posterity, so that I may create a record of Dad's incredible time on this planet. Dad was born prematurely, and in 1935 the common practice was to put premature babies into an incubator with a steady flow of oxygen. Turns out that resulted in blindness. But Dad believed that disability was a state of mind. As a result, he lived and spoke like a sighted man. "Good to see you," he would say. "I'll see you later." When he and Mom moved to 3150 North Lakeshore Drive, Dad wanted a condominium with a view. Not just any view, mind you, but a good view. To know Dad is to hardly notice he was blind. Not long after I met him, he would amaze me with his sense of direction. We would be driving in the city and he would say, "You'll want to turn left here at Clark Street." "How the hell did you know that?" I would say. Mom told me a story about when they lived in River Forest. She was driving home and he told her where to turn so that they could turn right into the driveway. She said, "Okay, smart Alec, I'm going to drive around and see if you could still direct me." She drove in circles, made left turns, made right turns, and eventually came to their street where they would have to turn left into the driveway. Dad, of course, simply said, "Turn right here and then left into the driveway." Blindness simply was not a disability to Dad. It was a characteristic, a trait. When he spoke with children, he would say his eyes were broken, much like an arm might be broken. His mother once wrote that, quote, "If he cannot see with his eyes, he will see with his heart." That describes Dad perfectly. He saw better than most because he saw with his heart. Quote, "One of the things I never let myself do," he told a reporter in 1962, "was to sit down and start thinking about what I could do if I could see." Now, by then, mind you, he had already become the first blind man to graduate Harvard, cum laude, and he was a graduate student at the University of Chicago, earning a master's in political science. He had faced adversity in his life, to be sure. His mother described the hardships of his early life this way. All of these events had followed a pattern of stick to it and don't give up. Don't give up. Be selfless and try real hard. Now, I'm a Star Wars fan, and I think Dad more likely, if unwittingly, followed the advice of Yoda, the Jedi Master, who said, "Do or do not. There is no try." As a child, Dad was bullied for being different and for being Jewish. Later in life, he suffered cancer, had 2 angioplasties, and fell down a concrete stairwell. I remember one incident in particular because it was my fault. Walking him to our backyard fire pit, he fell and lacerated his leg from his ankle to his knee. He had to go to the hospital and his recovery was long. To Dad, it was not a big deal. Does it hurt? A little, he might say. Hell, the day before he died, the hospice nurse asked how he was feeling and he said fine. He never pitied himself. Almost never complained. On his 43rd birthday in 1977, his father wrote him a letter. And he said, quote, "Most of all, as a father, I admire your guts. Doing what can't be done." I'm not sure Paul saw it that way. It's not that he did what can't be done, but rather he faced challenges with a can-do, no excuses attitude. After completing his master's at the University of Chicago, he earned a master's of education in rehabilitation at the University of Illinois. That's right, a Harvard degree, master's degrees. He then became an expert in his field. He served on the President's Committee on Employment of the Handicapped and as a founding member of the National Association of Rehabilitation Professionals. And he contributed in a very real way to the drafting and passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. During his 21-year career in the Human Resources Department at Sears, he helped Sears hire and retain people with disabilities, and in the process he established relevant industry standards. Dad always gravitated toward leadership roles. While attending Parents' Night for new students at Oak Park River Forest High School, he was recruited to the board of the Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind, where he served for 47 years, including as president of the board. He even served as president of his condo association. Never content with sitting still, Dad was asked to speak on rehabilitation at various conferences abroad. He used that opportunity to hop on a freighter, and cross the ocean to travel around the world by himself. He was not afraid. Quote, "Use your mind, experience, and brain," he would say, "to manage your difficulties." A lifelong learner, Dad loved to travel, and he visited 4 continents. Listen to just a few of his many experiences. He toured Bombay, Mumbai, sailed as a crew member on a British tall ship, rode a dog sled atop an Alaskan glacier, and on a tandem bicycle with Mom on Mackinac Island. He leaned over the edge of the Grand Canyon. He walked atop the Great Wall of China. He took a cruise with Susie from Los Angeles through the Panama Canal. He struck chords on Beethoven's piano in Vienna and visited Louis Braille's home in France. And he stepped on the beaches of Normandy where his Uncle Bob landed during World War II. Just last year, shortly after his 85th birthday, Susie and I took him to Milwaukee for a German meal at Mater's before crossing the lake to Michigan, where he crawled through a World War II submarine. Blind? 85 years old? Who cares? He loved adventure. And adventure is what he got when he met Mom. Quote, "It was the ultimate blind date," Mom would say when describing how she met Paul. For Paul, he not only fell in love with Mom, but when they married, he instantly became the father of 2 adolescent girls. Listen, if blindness, bullying, and sicknesses didn't do him in, what about raising 2 daughters? No surprise, Mom and Dad raised both Susie and Laura to be independent, ambitious, caring women, and both terrific parents of his 5 grandchildren, Ellie, Julia, Rachel, Nate, and Griffin. Dad loved their home in River Forest in no small part because it was unique. It had a walled garden and 3 fireplaces. Dad loved fire, the crackle and the heat. I know this because he would visit us in Northbrook and sit in front of a fire or by the backyard fire pit. But wait, he really liked fire. Mom tells us of one fall day in River Forest when the leaves from the walled garden were piled 3 feet high. And Dad, of course, wanted to set them on fire. But that's illegal, Mom said. Balls, he probably yelled. But we may get fined by local authorities, Mom likely retorted. Mazel tov, he might have been his reply. So Mom, ever Dad's accomplice, gathered a few discarded toilet paper rolls, stuffed them with paper, inserted them into the leaf piles, and Dad lit them to his delight. When they heard sirens, they ran into the house and stood lookout by the screen door. Even from that vantage point, far from the backyard blaze, they could feel the heat from the fire. Fortunately, the authorities did not come, and just as fortunate, the house did not burn down. Dad loved many things, we know, including his toys, the televisions, the computers, the stereos. He liked buying and test driving cars. He liked classical music and fine foods and reading, but high on his list was trains, which I'll leave to Shiva stories, and his 2 furry children, guide dogs Aaron and Norman. The city also allowed Dad to get around independently and commute on buses and the L, first by himself and then with the help of Aaron. Dad's one regret, and he almost never mentioned regrets, was not getting a guide dog earlier. Both Dad and Aaron were trained at the Seeing Eye in Morristown, New Jersey. Aaron was part yellow lab and part golden retriever, but to Dad he was 100% golden child. A terrific guide dog and companion, Aaron learned to manage the city streets, avoiding scaffolding and traffic, and learning the routes that Dad routinely traveled, including getting on and off the L and city buses. Aaron was Dad's, quote, safe transport and public relations ambassador. On more than one occasion, Aaron saved him from the traffic. After Aaron retired to life as a pet in the country is what Dad called Northbrook, Dad traveled back to the Seeing Eye, and he returned with Quando. Quando was a used guide dog, his previous owner having died relatively soon after acquiring him. Quando was unique. Just ask the Chicago Shakespeare Theater. Longtime season ticket holders, Mom and Dad had front row center seats for Henry III. During the first act, Quando wanted to meet the actors on stage, and he simply prodded up to greet them. After a short period of improvisation, he exited stage left. He was returned to Mom and Dad at intermission, and he was given a bow at the play's conclusion. He was returned to the Seeing Eye shortly thereafter. Enter Norman. Norman could not possibly live up to the expectations that Dad had following Aaron, but he more than made up for the experience Dad had with Quando. Norman was a yellow lab and a earnest guide dog, a frequent scavenger for scraps at the table. When he acted similarly at restaurants, Dad would scold him. Norman, not at a restaurant. Norman never caught on to that fine distinction. His nose on Dad's lap during mealtime was a common sight. Upon Norman's retirement, like Aaron before him, he came to live out the balance of his life with us as a common pet. And he bonded tightly with our neighbor Jack, an adult with developmental disabilities, while still loving visits from his father. Norman, always a caretaker, is buried in Jack's front yard. I myself enjoy just sitting with Dad and talking with him. We shared a sense of humor. My kids would say that I'm like Dad in that he was his own best audience, laughing hysterically at his own jokes. We would all laugh with Dad at the joy he expressed in the telling. He always read his own fortune cookies. Man who steps in dog poop has soiled soul. Or help, I'm captive in a fortune cookie factory. Even his last week, he maintained an optimistic outlook on life and good humor. When Mom asked him one night where his wallet was, he said without missing a beat, "I put it up my ass and tomorrow I'll shit out $1." Of course, he laughed hysterically, and so did we. A few years ago, Dad wrote that he was, quote, "grateful for every day that I can get out of bed feeling good and not sweat the small stuff, and do not plan for more than 2 years ahead. If I die tomorrow," he wrote, "I will be content." He was, quote, "quite sure that God, as we commonly think of him, is a creation of man and not the other way around. We create our own meaning as we deal with reality, help those who we love, and assist those less fortunate than ourselves." Dad, indeed, you are a great man. Like George Bailey, you've had a wonderful life, and all of us are more fortunate for having known you. We love you and we miss you terribly. If there is a heaven, I take comfort that you'll soon be running things up there with your 2 furry children, Aaron and Norman, at your feet.
It was beautiful. Thank you.
I'm going to start with something that Cousin Wendy wrote, Paul's cousin Wendy, who's in Seattle. If she was here, I'd have her read it herself. This is a note that she sent a few days ago to the broad array of cousins on Paul's mother's side of the family. "I am sitting on my back deck. It is a beautiful day in Seattle. I am remembering when my cousin Paul was visiting, napping in a lounge, peaceful as pie, in this very spot. Today, he is also at peace. Paul Scher passed this morning, at home in Chicago, peacefully with his family by his side. One could not ask for more. He was 85 years old, but as young at heart as any schoolboy. Paul did not shy away from accomplishments. He was the first blind person to graduate from Harvard. He had an impressive wall of awards for his work with the blind, people with disabilities, and his contribution to the Americans with Disabilities Act. Paul traveled the world his entire life. Not long ago, his bucket list was almost completed. A trip to the beaches of Normandy and one through the Panama Canal left only Australia on the list. Paul liked to go and do everything, but was perhaps happiest tucked into a bunk for a good night's sleep on a swaying train. He sure did love trains. Paul's sense of humor was unique, a little dark, but dandy, and solicited the biggest laughs from Paul himself, with the rest of us providing the chorus. Paul's legacy is very large, dotted with integrity, kindness, and love of family. I like to think his 2 guide dogs, Aaron and Norman, are there to meet him on the other side. Now from me. He was Paul, the name I most often called him. He was my stepfather. He married my mom when I was 11, but he was truly my full-fledged father, an amazing influence on my life in so many ways. He was my family. I grew up close to both my mom and dad's family, with grandparents and relatives on both sides, living in the same community and attending the same synagogue. Paul had the same family values as my mother, and when he married my mom, he fit in seamlessly with the existing Oak Park River Forest clan. At the same time, my sister and I acquired a new extended family. I always felt particularly grateful to be loved by 3 sets of grandparents. Family was so important to Paul. As he told me, growing up, his aunts and uncles and cousins were his friends, as he didn't have many school or neighborhood friends due to his disability. His Uncle George introduced him to classical music, a particular love of across his entire life. And he was very close with his Uncle Bob. They were the 2 bachelors of the family before he met my mom. He was my navigation resource. He had a mind like a steel trap when it came to train lines, bus routes, and Chicago City streets and neighborhoods. He could help me get anywhere. He was my comedian. His humor sometimes didn't hit the mark. It was often inappropriate, but it was completely original. The best was seeing him laugh at his own jokes, and I had to laugh with him. He was my bartender. Cocktail hour on Sunday evenings before watching 60 Minutes was a tradition. Absolute vodka on the rocks with a lemon twist, or a martini so dry it could be served on a paper towel, a Paul Scher classic joke line. He was my perfumer. A classic gift from my dad was perfume, going to the department store on his own to pick it up. He always chose the best scent. My favorite fragrances were selected by my dad. He was my dining partner. When I lived in Washington, D.C., we had special father-daughter dinners at the Market Inn, eating in the Jazz Bar area. My father appreciated a good meal, whether a fancy restaurant, ethnic cuisine, or the hot dog cart, or best of all, some of my mother's amazing meals. He was my travel companion. We had so many good family vacations, visiting grandparents in Florida, crossing Lake Michigan via car ferry, and then driving to northern Michigan. Our trip to Williamsburg had an eventual influence on my college decision. But what I will truly cherish is the time the 2 of us were able to spend together on our father-daughter excursions later in his life, including cruising through the Panama Canal, visiting cousin Julia in Cologne, Germany, stepping onto the Normandy beaches, and attending his 60th Harvard reunion. And closer to home, visiting granddaughter Ellie in Des Moines to meet with students in our classroom. We were great traveling partners. He was my philosopher. My dad had a unique philosophy on life, often dispensed on postcards to us on birthdays and holidays, and in typewritten letters. He loved giving a thoughtful, reflective toast at Thanksgiving, his favorite holiday, and providing a motto at the new year, such as, "We will all be fine in 1999. Given that both his mother and the uncles on his mom's side died relatively young, he didn't have an expectation of living a long life. He kept setting an expiration date for himself, which he kept exceeding. In the end, he had his father's constitution as Vic lived to 86 years old. I'm going to repeat some things that my husband shared, but I want to share Paul's personal philosophy and perspective on life directly from an autobiographical essay he wrote. Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." Jean-Paul Sartre said, "I am, therefore I think." Sartre has been my mentor ever since taking 3 years of French at Harvard. It's okay to search if you want to, but it has to be after you've used your mind, experience, and brain to manage life's difficulties, while remembering your successes in order to keep you sane. We create our own meaning as we deal with reality, help those whom we love, and assist those less fortunate than ourselves. I am a committed existentialist. I'm grateful for every day that I can get out of bed, feeling good, will not sweat the small stuff, and do not plan for more than 2 years ahead. If I die tomorrow, I will be content. That was written at age 78 a while ago. Most of all, he was and will continue to be my inspiration. I've spent a lot of time with my dad going through his memoirs and looking through historical papers, and I've come to see the arc of his life more clearly. What he achieved, the barriers he overcame, the influence he had on others, the joys and the struggles in his life. I'm continually overwhelmed that this man who was my father was such a special, unique person. I want to live my life as he lived his, with humor and acceptance, a can-do approach, a curiosity for life, and a passion for lifelong learning. We didn't quite finish his memoirs, but my personal goal is to honor his legacy and to continue to document his life. I love you, Dad. So 48 years ago, on May 14th, Paul married Ann Rubin. But Paul did not just marry Ann, he also married Susan, April, our Schnauzer, and me. And I got my picture. For our wedding, Paul gave me this locket inscribed with the date of the our family wedding on the back. And on the front is a small diamond. I read that if a diamond is real, it cannot break. So when my 7-year-old self, I decided to test it. The locket has now a lot of teeth marks, but my dad did buy me my first real diamond. That did not break. Susan and I are both proof that personality is shaped by both nature and nurture. Earl, our birth dad, gave us our start and a strong foundation. Paul, my father, has been by my side for life. Paul, thank you for being the only one to listen to me go on and on about my dreams really long at the breakfast table, and for teaching me how to build the best fires or set a pile of leaves on fire. You taught me to always read my car manuals, which I continue to yell at my own children to do, and to celebrate the big odometer milestones on my car. I will always remember our dad-daughter dates for dinner and a show or a concert. You telling the waiter at Binion's, yes, my daughter really does want liver and onions. Shoulder rides around the house. You'd let me direct you by pulling on your ears. Our canoe trips, cross-country skiing on Clinton Avenue in River Forest, and always starting a new year, usually with Ellie and Julia, waking them up at midnight, going outside and yelling out the front door, "Happy New Year, it's a holiday." Thank you for helping me see the trees through the forest during challenging times, for demonstrating the satisfaction of a career working with people with disabilities, and for teaching me every day how to be a loving parent and the meaning of family. I love you forever.
Julia?
I wrote a letter to my papa that I would like to read out loud. Dear Papa, you were not only my grandpa, but my best friend and role model. One of my favorite childhood memories is when you would tuck me into bed and tell me bedtime stories about Rocky and Stony. If it wasn't for you, I would not be the person I am today and the person I still aspire to be. Thank you for always being my #1 supporter. You have influenced me to go to nursing school and follow in your footsteps of helping others. Thank you for always making me laugh with your dark sense of humor. I loved being your roomie these past couple months. I will miss our nightly routine of watching the 10 o'clock news and listening to the midnight special. I'll be sure to continue your phrases like "home is where the garbage is" and singing the Din Din song for our four-legged family members. I will forever cherish the time we spent together. Love always, your granddaughter, Julia.
Let's take a moment of silence. Oh, were you speaking as well? I'm sorry. Please.
No, she's speaking.
Come on up. I apologize. Sorry.
You're fine.
Is there anybody else speaking?
There's a lot of people that want to talk to you, Papa. I also didn't read this when I was writing it, so I hope it's correct. Okay. Papa, I hope you know how influential and special you are in my life, and probably thousands of other people. I was so blessed. Have you in all my milestones in my life. What is special about the future is that myself and many others will carry you on with the lessons you've taught and the strength you've had and the love you've shown every day. I want you to know that just some of the meaningful moments you've put in my heart forever. The bond we had picking out a bike even when I was a teenager. You told me the importance of getting gears. Bedtime stories. I'm convinced Rocky and Stony are dragons.
I think the rock.
Your toast during holidays, no matter how shitty the world was. And we were so grateful for everyone around. Teaching me how to navigate through the city. Coming to my classroom to meet my kids. Communicating with my neighbor dog. I just hope you know how important and special you are to me. I will continue loving, what am I saying? Oh, loving you, and I'll keep reading my car manual. Love, your favorite grader, Ellie.
It is a tradition among our people that it is an honor to be buried in soil from Jerusalem, from our holy city. I'd ask that one of Paul...
The cemetery does not allow it.
Just to pour the dirt on?
Is that correct?
One of the kids to... Okay.
Do any of the family do it or no?
Yes, we need to.
That's
Susan,
fine.
they're
That's fine. So,
We can do it when the grave has been filled, put it on top.
and the rabbi.
You know what, we've been asked that we're not supposed to.
it's fine. Go ahead. Can we just pour it on now?
I'm going to put it on the Star of David. Gentlemen, you'll step aside.
No, give it to one of them. No? Okay.
Okay. Sorry. It's a tradition among our people that it is an honor to be buried in soil from Jerusalem. So soil was placed on the casket. We're going to lower the casket now and put the vault cover in place. Okay.
What was his father's name?
It's okay. Don't worry.
Victor.
El Malay Rachamim Shochein Bamromim. Hamtse Minucha Nichona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina Im Kedoshim Utohorim. Kizohar Harakia Mazhirim Et Nishmat Paul Scher. Shahalach La'olamo. Ba'al Harachamim Yaz Tirehu Beseter Kinafav La'olamim. Vayitzror Bitzrachaim Et Nishmato. Adonai Hunach Alato. V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar. Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Paul Scher, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Al Mikomo Yavo B'Shalom. May Paul come to his eternal home in peace. In just a moment, we'll conclude with Mourner's Kaddish.
earth then first?
Not the earth, just the cover.
Just the cover then the roof?
The folks who work here will put the vault cover in place, and then we'll join together in Kaddish Tom. Those who are able, I invite to please stand. If you'd like the words to Kaddish, they're in the inside of the booklet you received as you came in. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael ba'galav v'zman kariv imru amen Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach le'alam u'me'almaya yitbarach yishtabach yitfahar yitmam yitmaseh Miradar Vitalev Vitalal Shmeid Kudisha Brechu Laela Min Kol Birchata Vishirata Tushbechata Venechemata Da Amiran Be'alma V'imru Amen Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen Osei Shalom B'mromav Hu Ya'asei Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. May God send peace and comfort to all who mourn. Lech ki shalachach Adonai. Go your way, for God has called you. Lech v'Adonai yiyeh imach. Go your way, and may God be with you. V'halach lefanecha tzidkecha kavod Adonai ya'asvecha. May your righteousness go before you, and the glory of God receive you. Amen. The folks from the cemetery will put earth into the grave now. If you wish, you can stay. If you prefer, you can return to your cars. Is that okay? first time I went to your condo to meet you and Paul, and how gracious he was.